Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we have a very important guest today, Rey Hernandez. And let me tell you a little bit about Rey. Rey is one of the co-founders and directors of FREE, which is the Foundation for Research of Extraterrestrial Encounters. And their website is experiencer.co, experiencer.co. And Rey is an experiencer, but he's also a normal kind of guy. He's an estate tax attorney with the IRS. He was previously the director of the Center for a Sustainable Urban Environment at the City University of New York and the director of the Office of Community Environmental Planning for the city. Oh, that's twice. He has attended Rutgers College, Cornell University, and was a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in City and Regional Planning. And he was also the recipient of a National Science Foundation PhD fellowship, and Rey resides with his family in Miami, Florida, but he is an experiencer. So this is very interesting. And Rey is a co-founder of this organization called FREE, which is a new not-for-profit research organization. The Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters is what FREE stands for. And it has been established by various academics, PhD physicists, psychologists, various other scientists, medical professionals, and a diversity of other experiencers. And they're all working under one umbrella to bring together a much-needed multidisciplinary voice to the subject, which is the area of ET contact, which we are defining as human encounters with non-human intelligence and related paranormal phenomena. And it was established with the insistence and guidance of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who we all know was the fifth man on the moon and the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And he is considered by many to be the father of modern scientific consciousness studies. Rey was invited by Edgar to have one-on-one discussions at his home on at least 5 occasions over the last 18 months, and so on and so forth. There are so many people involved in this organization, and Dr. Les, would you like to say something before we bring on Rey?
Oh, sure. Just from my perspective, this is a holographic universe where everything that is there in some resonant frequency within each of us, and each of us is within everything else. And so that when you have this perspective, then the ontological status or reality status of what people perceive and experience is to be explored and treasured. It's just like a reality is an elephant. We all grab it by a different part of its anatomy and have different ideas. But if the more we put them all together, and that's just what Rey is doing, the more we get a picture of the elephant that reality is.
And with that, Rey, welcome to the Sacred Matrix.
Thank you, Sasha and Janet. It's an honor to be on your show. Mary has sent me an email that she's been on your show several times, and she's had a blast, and she said, enjoy it, Rey.
Oh, wonderful. We love Mary. We'll have to have her back again sometime. So, well, we talked a little bit before coming on air, and, how did you get in this? You're such a normal kind of person, and you're leading a normal life. What happened? You want to start with experiences?
I wish I could say that I took a whole bunch of LSD, but no, that wasn't the case.
Nobody spiked the punch.
Nobody spiked the punch except the ETs. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. Up until about 2.5 years ago, I was your typical overeducated atheist material rationalist. My background, I came from a working class background. Both of my parents are factory workers. I was one of these kids that I never had to study. I never opened a book, even through high school. I just would do well. And I basically was a city kid. And
I would have hated in school because you always screwed up our curve, and I had to.
Well, since I never did any of my assignments, I was always penalized and wound up with a B average. So
Okay.
I never did any homework, was rarely in class with that type of situation.
Okay.
But anyway, I once I got admitted to Rutgers College, that's when I first began to write my first college paper. I've never even written a paper before. First time I ever studied for an exam. So it was a big waking up call. But after 4 years of Rutgers, I did extremely well. I then went to work for the University of California at Berkeley for 3 years. And then I applied to several schools to study urban planning because I wanted to work with developing countries during third world economic development planning. And I got admitted to Cornell, which had one of the best programs in the country in that area. And then while I was there, I did extremely well. I aced out at Cornell, and I got a National Science Foundation PhD fellowship, which then in turn, I was able to go to almost any school I wanted to. So I went to Berkeley for my PhD. I was at Berkeley a total of, with the 3 years that I had worked there, I would say maybe 8 years. When I first got there, it was still, hippie Berkeley. There was still some semblance of the 70s feel, but after that it quickly changed and became gentrified and commercialized. But anyway, I finished all of my coursework and exams for my PhD at Berkeley, and I was at the New School for Social Research, writing my dissertation and working as a research assistant and teaching part-time. And then my ex-wife got a brain aneurysm, which forced me to leave that job and to take 2 full-time jobs because we had 2 little babies, and her sister was still in high school, and her mom had just recently retired. And so I was never able to finish my dissertation because, as both of you know, these elite schools, they only take very few PhD students per year. And at Berkeley in urban planning was only 6 students per year. So if you're holding up a slot for 2 years in a row, what I did is I voluntarily called them and I said, look, I'm withdrawing my candidacy, even though I only had about a year and a half to go to write my dissertation. So what happened was afterwards I then worked for the city of New York doing very innovative environmental planning projects. I was the director of an innovative environmental planning division, which all those programs were then gutted when the administration of Rudy Giuliani came on board. But but I did write a pro bono grant for the City University of New York, and which they received, and it was for a $3 million program. And then the dean at the City University of New York called me, and it was a perfect time because that whole division I was in was totally gutted, and they basically forced me to work out of a little cubicle doing nonsense work. And so she invited me to become the director of the Center for a Sustainable Urban Environment. And there we primarily worked with the Bronx community, which is a heavily polluted county in New York City, implementing some of these novel community environmental projects that we had begun at the City University of New York. And I took advantage because I didn't finish my PhD to go to law school. So I worked full time as a director and a non-tenure track professor at the City University of New York, and I went to law school at the same time. And so having to pay maintain my 2 teenage children at that time, and also just recently married with my new spouse, I had to get a job. So the IRS came calling, and I took a job as an estate tax attorney. And luckily, I'm going after the multimillionaires and not the common folk. So if there's any type of positive outcome, it was that I'm trying to deflate the the income of the multimillionaires.
Yes.
But it's a very boring job, but it pays the bills.
Yes.
So that was a little bit about my background up until March of 2012.
And then what happened?
Oh my goodness! Then my whole worldview came crashing down. It was like I had 2.5 years of an ayahuasca trip that I'm still trying to come off of. But
Wow.
What happened was this was in March of 2012. We had a dog. Her name was Nena, which in Spanish means little girl. And she was our first daughter. We treated her just like a child. And at that time, she was almost 17 years old. And she was very lethargic, walking very, very slowly. She couldn't even run anymore. And so we were keeping her afloat with various medications, but we knew that any day we were going to have to bring her to the vet to put her to sleep. And then on a Saturday afternoon at about 6, she became paralyzed from the neck down. And so at that time, we saw that she wasn't in distress. She was just looking, very confused. And so instead of going to one of these animals hospitals that charge you like $1,000, we decided to wait till the following day to bring her to our vet and to euthanize her and have a little ceremony associated with it, because she was considered part of the family. But we didn't get to that point. Sunday morning at about 6 o'clock, the dog was barking and woke us up. And my wife picked her up and moved her to see if she had recovered. And basically, she was still paralyzed from the neck down. And my wife pushed her and moved her in different directions. And, she was totally paralyzed. So she carried her down the stairs to let her do her necessities. And once my wife got down the stairs, she saw in our living room, which was basically 10 feet away from the stairs, roughly 4 feet from the floor, 1 foot from the wall, an object that was floating. And let me describe it. I did not see that object. I'm just paraphrasing what my wife told me. It was sort of like an upside down U, metallic in shape. It had 2 green lights in the middle of it, and floating in the air. And so when my wife saw that, her being a good Catholic Christian, she was raised in Mexico. She came to the U.S. when she was 21. She immediately started kneeling down and praying. And she basically said in her head, if you're a bad spirit, get the hell out. If you're a good spirit or an angel or the Virgin Mary, it's hard to conceive the Virgin Mary as a metallic upside down U shape, but that's what she told me. She said, then please stay, if you are benevolent. And, I just want you to, for my Nena not to suffer. And then all of a sudden, these white fluorescent lights shot out from the side of this mini craft, I guess whatever you might call it, and then these green lights shot out and started like scanning her and the dog and Nena.
Wow.
And at that point, my wife freaked out and she started calling me, Ray. And this was Sunday morning, 6 o'clock. I didn't sleep well the night before. And I was like, leave me alone. I want to sleep. It was like, she was yelling upstairs and I'm like yelling down, leave me alone. I want to sleep.
Oh,
and
wow.
I thought she had seen a cockroach or something like that. And so she was still insistent yelling me. And I was like, getting upset. Here's my precious sleep time, So finally, after like 10 minutes, she goes upstairs and physically drags me downstairs. She never told me what it was, so I said, once I find that cockroach,
Yes.
I don't even kill cockroaches now, but back then it was like, where's that cockroach so I could stomp on it,
Uh-huh.
But what I saw was something totally different from what she saw. First of all, when I got down the stairs, and again, let me try to describe the details of it because it's very difficult if you're not there to try to grasp, the entirety of what happened. First of all, I had tunnel vision. What happened was that I did not see my wife. I did not see the dog. All I did was just focus on that object. And let me describe it. What it was an object that was in the same location that my wife had seen, that upside down metallic U object with those lights. But what I saw was a floating plasma entity. And I call it entity because it controlled my mind. And let me describe it. It was approximately 3 feet wide by 1.5 feet in height. It was sort of rectangular in shape, but it didn't have any outer edges because it was like a floating energy plasma. Multicolored, all different colors. And it wasn't like the rainbow where the colors were all joined together. No, it was like sort of like you get water in a tank and then you squirt different types of dyes in it. And then you put like a mixer and it's all twirling around. That was sort of what it looked like. And it was semi-transparent. And then I did something that, a sane, rational person would not do. Okay. For many months, I questioned why I did that. But now I know because it controlled my mind. But at that point, I had no idea that they were able to do this. But basically what I did is I looked at it. I squinted my eyes. I waved my hand at it and I said, bullshit. And then I proceeded to turn around. I walked upstairs. I laid in my bed. I folded my hands on my chest and I looked straight up at the ceiling.
Wow.
I don't recall having any conscious thoughts at all. I knew that I was awake, but I don't recall thinking of anything. So roughly 15 minutes later, again, it's, 10 to 15 minutes. It's difficult to get an exact time, but I would say 10 to 15 minutes later, it was sort of like the hypnotist said, snapped his fingers and said, okay, wake up. We're finished done with your dog and the wife. Wake up. And all of a sudden I woke up and I was like, holy, what? What the, just happened. And I ran downstairs. And when I got downstairs, my wife was prancing and dancing and jumping all over the floor. And the dog was jumping with her and running around having, action, just like a puppy. She was running around like a little puppy. And she was jumping up and down, like a Jack Russell Terrier would do, like a little puppy Jack Russell Terrier. And my wife was in her hands in the air. Hallelujah, hallelujah. The angels cured her, the angels cured her. In Spanish.
Right.
Los ángeles la curaron. Los ángeles la curaron. Los ángeles la curaron. And I was like, what the, is going on? It was like one of these scenes that, you see people pinching themselves to, am I awake or, what's going on? But
did you ever deconstruct it together to?
Well,
how it happened?
I tried, but let me tell you what my wife's response has consistently been. I asked my wife, I said, Dulce, what the hell happened? And she says, you saw it with your own 2 eyes. The angels came down. They answered my prayers. They miraculously cured my nanita. And I was like, that didn't look like an angel to me,
Okay.
But, at least what I would, conceive of an angel. And here I was a total, agnostic, And so at that point, I tried to pry more information from her. I said, Dulce, I don't recall, did you see what I saw? I didn't see what did you see? Then she told me what she saw, And then I said, that's not what I saw. And I described what I saw, that plasma, entity, the plasma being and what it looked like. She says, I didn't see that. And then I told her, as a matter of fact, when I got downstairs, I didn't see you, all I was just looking at was straight at that object. I don't recall not having any type of peripheral vision, And she said, yeah, and then she said, well, I definitely did not see what you saw. I don't know if you're making that up or what.
What happened when you left and went upstairs? What happened? Did she?
She does not recall at all.
Just recall. Oh. Okay.
She does not recall what happened.
And then how long did the dog live after that?
The dog lived for about another 9 months.
Uh-huh.
And again, this was almost 17-year-old dog. So they were able to cure her of her paralysis, give her roughly for the next 6 months or so, the energy of like a youthful dog, because before, as I told you, she was, barely walking, very, very slowly, gingerly. And then for 6 months, we got like our puppy back,
Oh.
And so, that's what took place. And so what happened afterwards, I immediately started going to the internet. What the, took place. Let me try to find out. Typed in UFOs, paranormal. Like a week later, I found out that there's this organization called MUFON. So I sent them my $50, which, did not do me any good, And then, they're gods. They're gods, they're devils, they're Anunnakis, they're this, they're that, reptilians this, and, Gray this. And I was like, what the, is going on,
Oh, they were trying to tell you that what you saw in terms of, did they send an investigator out to?
No, it was on my next adventure that I eventually called MUFON. But I'm skipping over a couple of intermediary experiences here with my wife.
Okay.
What happened was that in May of 2012, our dog woke up, Nana woke up my wife at about 3:30 in the morning. Okay, that magical witching hour. And at that time, my wife went downstairs with her, and she went to open up the back door, which is where she does her thing in the backyard. But she didn't want to go there. She wanted to go in the front door. And my dog never goes in the front door. Never, never, never. So anyway, she was jumping up and down. My wife had described it. So my wife opened the front door. My wife went down an initial series of steps, and we live in a cul-de-sac. It's a quiet area of Miami. It's a suburban area. The lots are, somewhat large for Miami. They're like a third of an acre in size. And even the street that goes into our cul-de-sac is a one-way street. There's very little traffic going in there. And so what my wife heard was a noise that she said it sounded like a 747 jet that was right on top of her head. And I said, well, how long did that last? She said it was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And I said, well, how loud was it? And she said it was extremely loud. And I said, was it loud enough to wake up the whole neighborhood? She said it should have woken up the whole neighborhood. All the lights should have come out because that's how loud the noise was. And then I said, well, what happened then? She said, well, all of a sudden the noise went away. And when I looked up in the sky, I saw a huge, gigantic craft. And what she told me, the way she started the conversation initially was, I have a little ambulance coming by me. Okay. But what she told me was that hold on one second. Sorry, I apologize for that.
Yeah.
Okay. And what she said initially was that, last night I saw a beautiful angelic craft. It had colors just like the stained glass windows of our church. My little angels came and paid me a visit last night. It was so beautiful, so wondrous. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was like, what the, angelic craft, And then she told me that it had these beautiful colors just like our stained glass windows in the church. Mm-hmm. And myself, I was not a religious person. I'm still not a religious person. I'm definitely very spiritual now, but I would be the type of individual that would accompany your spouse to church so you wouldn't have any marital spats, So, anyway, that's how she started the conversation. Then I started asking her, what did it look like? And basically the best I could come up with, it was approximately 2 blocks away. And it was like 2 or 3 times the size of a football field. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like a very thick cigar shape. I guess it was sort of like a disc shape, but you didn't see the other side of it. It was just the whole flat side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, she began seeing crafts. One time in Mexico, she was on the roof of her sister's house. And my wife is not a heavy-duty meditator. You know, she does, praying more than anything. And she incorporates a little bit of the meditation in there. And so she was on the roof of her sister's house in Veracruz, Mexico, which is a large city. It's a port city. And she told me that she called down a craft. And she did that for about a half an hour, but it never came. And so she went downstairs, must have been like 10:30 at night. And then when she got downstairs, like about an hour later, an hour and a half later, her sister started yelling at her, Dulce, Dulce. And so my wife went downstairs where they had a big TV, and the lead story was UFO over Veracruz Airport stops traffic for 1 hour. And we have 3 reporters at the scene, 2 at the airport, 1 at the harbor, and we have lots of videos, lots of pictures, And my wife didn't say anything. She just stayed quiet, So the next day was the baptism of her niece. And there, many of the family members got together. And my wife sat next to the second cousin that she hadn't seen like in 20 years. And naturally, that was the topic of conversation.
Right.
And so the niece said, I see these crafts all the time, and I communicate with these entities all the time too, And and as a matter of fact, this cousin, that family member, that tia, that uncle, and she said they've seen crafts, and so then my wife pulled her to the side and told her what's been happening. And so and then that was the first person that my wife ever told about that. She never even told her family members. And so what happened was that the cousin, the next day, she was going down the coast to where she lives, and my wife was going up the mountains to stay with another sister that lives in the capital city called Jalapa, which is a big zone difference in temperature. So it's sort of like all of a sudden you're in Miami and then you're in San Francisco. Big change in climate. So anyway, what my wife and her cousin suggested. Look, let's do an experiment. Let's call down a craft at 9 o'clock on our way home. Okay. And then we can compare notes at night. And so my wife said, okay, and so they meditated for a little while. And my wife was like, I don't believe in this stuff. That was just a coincidence of what took place, the day before. So anyway, the next day, my wife went in a 2-car caravan to the city, and in the car was her sister. There were various adult friends, 2 nieces that were teenagers, and not at 9 o'clock, but at 9:30, this huge craft descended from the sky, purplish in color, beamed the blue light down in front of the lead car, stayed for like 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden the light descended and the craft shut off, and everyone saw it. And then my wife came home like a month later. She never said anything to me because
so
she
you
knew.
haven't seen anything yet at this point.
No,
Your wife
correct.
had all these
Yeah, correct. I only had that experience inside the home.
Mm-hmm.
So she came home like a week before. She didn't tell me anything because she thought that she was just going to be adding more fuel to the fire. Because I've been spending almost all of my spare time reading UFO books and on the internet. And all that did was just confuse me more. Okay. And so then one day, this was in late August, a friend of mine called me, and he had a whole bunch of parking tickets. And I said, look, you need to consolidate all those tickets and just go to court one time. And I said, I'll do that for you. I just need the tickets. So he called me that day. It was at night. And he said, Ray, I got the tickets. I said, okay, great. I'll wait for you outside. So I'm waiting for him outside. It's about 9 o'clock at night in the cul-de-sac. And I'm never outside because it's dead out there. There's no traffic. No one's there, And all of a sudden, 2 thoughts popped into my mind. One was that huge, quote-unquote, angelic craft that my wife had seen months before. And then secondly was the day before I had seen this individual call down a craft in the middle of the day. And what it was like this little tiny speck that'd be flickering, right, flickering left. And so I said to myself, what the hell? Let me try.
Uh-huh.
So then I began, again, it was like, I really was not serious about this. It was more like half jokingly. Oh, I want to see the beautiful angelic craft that my wife saw, the one with the colors just like the stained glass windows of our church. You had the privilege to show yourself to my wife, but not to me. I would like to be able to see you and communicate with you, blah, 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 blah.
Wow.
And again, I was like half fooling around, And so I did a 180. I turned around, looked up in the sky all over the place, nothing. I repeated that for up to 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, I said to myself, what a freaking ass I'm making of myself. I'm really losing it. This time that's it. I got to give this shit up. I'm going crazy.
Right.
All of a sudden, on top of my neighbor's house, next door neighbor's house, he has a ranch style house. There was a craft that was the size sort of like a football stadium.
Wow.
It was literally the bottom of the craft. He has 3 palm trees, queen palm trees.
Right.
They block the bottom part of the craft. Okay? Just to let you know how close this thing was to the roof, and it was literally 50 feet from me. If I had a little pebble or something, I could have thrown it, at it and hit it. And let me describe the craft. What it was thousands and thousands of oblong light streaks, white light streaks. The night was totally cloudy. You could not see one star in the sky. It was completely cloudy. And then it was huge. It was, it went back at least 2 blocks long. And I could tell because we've got some very tall trees, like way back then, and it was even further than those. And maybe 5 blocks in that direction, we have a major thoroughfare that runs through there, Uh-huh. And when I was looking at this, I was like, somebody is seeing this thing. This thing is huge,
Great.
And then all of a sudden a voice popped into and it was translucent. It wasn't materialized. It was, should I say, transparent,
Right.
where you could see the clouds through it, but you had these thousands of oblong light streaks that form the shell of this craft, and inside you could see similar white streaks that were operating sort of like an energy, like a plasma energy fluctuating. And then something happened, which I heard my daughter's voice popped into my head. And my daughter had never told me this, but I could have sworn my last dollar bill, that it was my daughter. And this is what the voice said. Daddy, you and Mommy have seen UFOs. Next time you see a UFO, I want to see one, okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, my daughter had just turned 10 years old. It was July 31st that she turned 10 years old. And this is late August, okay? So this is a little kid we're talking about, okay? The last thing a rational parent would do would be to subject your 10-year-old child to something like this, But, I was not thinking rationally at all. It's like part of my consciousness was totally under control. So anyway, I took like about 5 feet steps to the right, because remember, I lived in a cul-de-sac. And I shouted at my window, where my daughter would be. And I said, Scotty. She opens up the window. What is it, Daddy? I said, there's a UFO out here. Come out. Hurry up. And so she darts out, like in 5 seconds she's outside. And now we have 2 people watching this thing. Okay. And she goes, Daddy, what is that? And I said, sweetheart, it's a UFO, but it's in hiding. It doesn't want to be caught, because, how do you explain to a young child that it's, what the term they use, cloaked or whatever?
Yeah, it's cloaked.
Yeah. And, so anyway, and we weren't scared at all. It was like, it was a light show. We were being entertained. That was the mindset that we had, And so, she wasn't scared at all. And then we were there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, watching this light show. And my friend finally came, but he didn't come alone. Okay. He came with his wife and their 17-year-old daughter. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this couple. He's, at that time, he was 48 years old. from Mexico, college graduate. She was, I think, 2 years older than him, college graduate from Columbia. And both of them were these hardcore Catholics that would do the rosary for 10 hours straight at a funeral, you know? That type, you know? And then the 17-year-old is like a typical teenager, always with the little iPod or thingamajiggy that they all have, and, you know, texting and all that stuff. And then she got together with my daughter, and then they started, you know, talking about this crap. So my friends immediately start, what is that? What is that? I said, you know what the hell it is, you know, and all in Spanish. Tú sabes lo que es un ovni. Ovni in Spanish means UFO. Right. And then they go, no, it can't be. Then they started saying, oh no, it's got to be circus lights. You know, like those circus lights that pours those big straight lines up in the sky, that type of thing. I said, sure, you know, those circle lights are forming these thousands of horizontal oblong light streaks right above our neighbor's house, you know, give me a better one. They say, oh no, it's got to be the headlights from the street behind us that are beaming on the clouds and in doing this. Oh yeah, so now we got 1,000 cars all at the same time, beaming down and then just forming these horizontal oblong streets. Give me another one. And they went on and on. Finally, you know, atmospheric conditions, you know, the only thing they didn't throw out was, what did Heinrich say? Swamp gas, you know? Yeah, that was the only thing they didn't throw out, swamp gas. So anyway, in my head, I was kind of laughing. I was like, to me, it was like hysterical that they were trying to, you know, make shit up, you know, and
well, they didn't admit it was something out of this world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how can you, you know? Because I didn't tell them that I was the one that called down that crap, you know, because then they would really think I was totally insane, you know. So I didn't tell them that. So anyway, they were like, the whole paradigm was totally, you know, shocked. And so anyway, I was laughing internally, and I was basically thinking in my head, I said, man, they don't believe you. Like, I was talking to these ETs. And now it's kind of funny, but back then I was like laughing to myself, man, they don't believe you, man. They don't believe you. And all of a sudden, the whole light scheme changed. Those oblong light streaks stopped immediately, and they were replaced by thousands and thousands of stars that were 10 times the size of Venus, that flickered on and off like 3 or 4 times in a fraction of a second. And what they would be doing would be concentrating in different areas of the craft. I mean, they would still be throughout the craft, but in certain areas it would be more of a concentration. Then they would change to this quadrant, then that quadrant. It was like, you know, we were being totally entertained, you know. Wow. And all we needed was, you know, a lounge chair, a 6-pack of cold Coronas, something to munch on, and it was like the 4th of July, except right on top of my neighbor's house, you know.
And did any of the neighbors come out? Anybody else?
Well, it's interesting that you raised that, okay? And we get back to this whole item of part of your consciousness being under their control, you know. There's a certain threshold that you just can't cross over, you know, of your understanding your reality. And let me explain that. While all of us were watching this thing and our necks were being strained by looking straight up at this thing, you know, on top of our neighbor's house, our neighbors turned on the light in their living room so we could see that there's 2 individuals, and appeared to be the father, and maybe his wife or his daughter. His daughter at that time was like 17 or 18 years old, and they had the light on, looking at us for like about, I would say, at least a minute, and then all of a sudden they turned the light off, and then we couldn't see what was happening inside the house. Now, a normal, rationally thinking in person would like go over to the door, knock on the door and say, Pablo, get your ass out, man. Look what's above you. You know, come and join the show. Right? But it didn't even come into our mind. Okay. Also, everyone had a cell phone, including, you know, the teenager. They're always, you know, that little iPod, whatever they have, is always glued to their hands. Okay.
They took pictures.
No one ever even entertained the thought of taking pictures. Okay. So what happened after this, those stars, the star light show, took place for like 10 minutes. My friends all of a sudden said, oh, we got things to do. Okay. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, oh, don't worry about those parking tickets. I'll do that motion. I'll call you when it's ready for you to pick up. Now, again, a rationally thinking person, Okay. Would all of a sudden you leave in the middle of a once in a lifetime experience? No. Also from my end, why didn't I question him? I said, are you freaking crazy? You're leaving in the middle of this, of this show, You got to be kidding me, No, it didn't even pop into my mind. What popped into my mind was, don't worry about those tickets. I'll take care of them, So then I went back with my daughter, and about another 10 minutes took place that we were watching this thing. And my daughter was completely silent, and I was silent, just watching this thing. And again, we were fully conscious the whole time of our time, and all of our experiences. I didn't have any missing gaps or anything of that sort. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter and I were watching this for another 10 minutes after my friends left. And all of a sudden, I felt like mosquitoes were attacking me. I was wearing shorts, and I began slapping my legs. And so after like 1 minute of this torture by these mosquitoes, I was like, come on, Skedet, let's get out of here. These mosquitoes are killing me. So I grabbed her hand. We walked inside. My daughter didn't say anything. About 5 minutes after we got inside, my daughter goes to me, Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside. And all of a sudden, just like when I was upstairs in the bed, okay, like that hypnotist snapped his fingers, like, wake up, kid, we're finished with you, It was that same type of feeling. And like I woke up and I was like, holy, what the hell just happened? So I ran, I grabbed my camera, my video recorder, I ran outside, and lo and behold, there was nothing there. Okay?
Yeah.
Nothing there. Now, that story, and that's when I called MUFON, and they brought, someone over, and, they did the little Mickey Mouse investigation. They didn't even want to talk to the other 3 people that were with me, They questioned my wife about the experiences inside the house, what happened in Mexico. She told them everything. My daughter was there. She told them everything. So it was the 3 of us that verified everything to MUFON. So it's not like they're going to think, oh, we've got 3 crazies in that one family,
Right.
But they didn't even bother to interview the other 3 folks that were outside, But anyway, what happened was that that wasn't even the big story for me. Okay, that was small potatoes compared to what happened later. Okay, small potatoes. What happened was, again, and this falls more in line with the spiritual and the paranormal, multidimensional aspects of my training. Okay. Mm-hmm. What I know now was that I was being prepared for something, which I know now what it is, at least this particular project and mission that I've got. But I was still, an atheist, semi-converted material rationalist, but they needed to do a rapid jump start to transform me. And that little jolt was just that, a little jolt. What had happened was, remember I told you that all I was doing was just going to the internet, 8 hours a day and reading all these books on UFOs. Right. Immediately after that experience, that stopped like a cold turkey. Okay? Cold turkey, I stopped. What I did, and I don't remember how I transitioned to this, but within a couple of days, I was ordering from Amazon 20 books on near-death experiences and consciousness studies.
Oh, okay. So you shifted from UFOs to near-death experiences.
Near-death, like for every 3 NDE books, I would order 1 book on scientific consciousness studies. Okay. The type of work that Institute for Noetic Sciences were doing, and those types of similar books, And so what had happened was just absolutely crazy. I went literally berserk.
I've had this obsession, so I can relate to it.
Yeah. What happened was for 12 hours a day on the weekdays and on the weekends, 18 hours a day, I did nothing else except read these books. I would go to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning with a book on my chest, and that's how I would wake up. And then over a 4-month period until, again, the last week of December. Now I know about that magical date of that last week of before Christmas. It was the week before Christmas.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was the week before Christmas of 2012, which now I understand that time period had some major significance to it. But during that time period, I had no idea. But basically, what happened until then, I became an expert in near-death experiences. And in consciousness,
Had you ever
yes,
had a near-death experience?
excuse me,
Had you ever had one?
not up until that point.
Okay. Okay.
And then the week before Christmas, here I was, like an expert in near-death experiences, and no one's an expert in consciousness studies because that's just too heavy duty to even get a fundamental grasp of. But at least I had a fundamental understanding of consciousness studies.
Uh-huh.
And then on a Friday, my daughter had a high fever for 2 days straight. And my daughter was the one that always brought her to the pediatrician. And that day, my wife could not bring her, so I brought my daughter.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't even been to see this that clinic in 3 years. And I didn't know that my daughter had a new physician, pediatrician. And anyway, this woman is from Venezuela. She's about 40 years old. And I had never spoken to anyone about near-death experiences or these books that I was reading. Because you mention this to anyone, they would think that you're nuts,
Right. You're still
And so,
normal.
excuse me?
You're still normal in the regular straight world. You're not. You're doing a tax attorney with the IRS.
Yes. And I had not been converted at that time, okay? I was partially converted. So anyway, I was quiet, never told anyone about my experience. And so that day, this woman who was a total stranger, she became the first person ever that I mentioned NDEs to. Mm-hmm. And let me sort of explain how this conversation took place. Because I guess for a non-experiencer, you can certainly understand this, but someone who doesn't have these experiences is very difficult to try to understand. But this is what took place. All of a sudden, coming out of my mouth, and this was in Spanish, okay, to this doctor, even though she was fluent in English. Mm-hmm. I said, I looked her straight in the eyes. It was like I was paralyzing her with my eyes. And I said, excuse me, doctor, have you ever heard of near-death experiences? I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this topic. And out of those 300 books, approximately 75 were written by medical doctors. And out of those, 20 to 25 were written by professors in medical schools. And this topic has been thoroughly studied scientifically and validated. And it's something that you must understand is a reality. And I was firm with my eyes. Now, that was coming out of my mouth. But was inside my head was are you fucking crazy? Why are you telling this woman this stuff? You don't even know this woman. And oh my God, you're insulting the hell of her. Just shut up. Be quiet. Be quiet. It's like I had two voices inside my head,
Uh-huh.
Like a yin and yang or something like that, right? And all of a sudden, my mouth shut up and I was able to talk, my real mind. And her eyeballs popped out. And I said, oh my God, I offended the hell out of this woman,
Right.
And so I said, excuse me, disculpa doctora, no quería ofenderte. Excuse me, doctor, I didn't mean to offend you, And she goes, no, you didn't offend me. How did you know I had a near-death experience? Okay? Uh-huh. So she became the very first person out of 3 days in a row, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The very first 3 people I ever told about NDEs all had NDEs. Okay? So what are the statistical probabilities that all of a sudden these ETs guided you to read, these hundreds of books for 4 months, and then the very first 3 people you ever talked about NDEs on a Friday, on a Saturday, and Sunday all had NDEs.
Right.
Yes.
It was beyond random probability. It was
beyond random probability, okay? So the first one was the doctor. I won't spare you the details, but basically she just went through to the OBE stage. She didn't go into the matrix or the tunnel, light, that sort of stuff, but she did verify the procedures that the doctors were doing on her. When she was 10 years old, she was brought into the hospital clinically dead. Mm-hmm. So she described the doctor. He was tall, like a basketball player with blonde hair. The nurse was 5 feet, fat, with a short haircut, 1950s glasses. She then floated through 2 walls and was on top of her parents. and described right next to my daughter. For 15 minutes, she stopped her practice and spoke about the exact conversation that her parents were having, including the lady with a red shirt that had a little child with a ball that was throwing at her father that was bothering the hell out of him, And she described all of that, okay? The next day with this total stranger at church, we had a church dinner that I sat down next to this total stranger, and again, the same thing came out of my mouth like a robot. Excuse me, sir. Have you ever heard of near-death experiences? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, shut the hell up. What are you saying this? And his eyeballs pop out. Okay. And then the next day, and then his mother died in his arms. She even described the paramedics that came through the door. She described it as a big black football player, like 6'3", 300 pounds, followed by a short white woman with a blonde ponytail. And those are the paramedics, And she went to the tunnel, the light, met her deceased husband, had a communication with God, the full works.
Yeah.
The next day, I always visit my parents on the weekends. And so I said, I knew something was up. This was not a coincidence, It still hadn't fully struck me, So I said, I better tell my atheist father, the person who's always cursing God out, who had never been in a church, and he was 83 years old, in bed, couldn't hardly get out of bed. I said, his days are numbered and he needs to know what's going on. So my mother and I got him dressed. We went to the patio, and then I proceeded to tell both of them the story.
Uh-huh.
And then he goes, that happened to me. And I was like, say what? The perfect translation in Spanish was, ¿qué? It was like, I was like, whoa. Like,
wow.
Something's really up now. I know this stuff is all pre-planned, And then he tells me, about 15 years before he had, quadruple heart bypass, how, he floated out of his body during the surgery. He saw his open heart, saw all these doctors, all these nurses. And then he felt like he got sucked up by a vacuum cleaner, went to the tunnel. There was this light. And once he got in there, the light was like the sun, but he quickly adjusted to it. Then his father and mother and his brother were waiting for him. They had some type of communication, an angelic embrace. And then they presented him to God, or an entity that he stated was God. And then God gave him what I now know is called the life review. But he didn't explain, he didn't say life review, obviously. What he did say was that he was up there for at least 20 years, at least. And I said, 20 years? What are you talking about? He says, well, that's how long it took God to teach me all the good and the bad that I had done in my life. And he saw that experience not only from his brain, but also from the brain of all the other people he had affected.
Right.
So he would, yeah.
That.
And so they were like looking at him, but it was the other person. He got into their consciousness. And so, I then, he said that God told him a whole bunch of things. So I asked him, well, what specifically did God tell you? So he waved his hand at me and he goes, how in the hell do I remember? That shit was 15 years ago, And at that point, I turned to my mother. I said, Mom, you never told me this. And she said, we've only spoke about it once before today. And that was when your father was coming out of the surgery. He was hysterical about telling me this story. And I was like, go to sleep. And he was insistent. So I heard the story. And at that point, I thought it was a dream or anesthesia. So I told them, okay, go back to sleep. And they never spoke about it since that day. And on the way home, on the drive home, I looked up in the sky and, I had like an epiphany. All of a sudden, it was like this big bolt of a nuclear reactor plant shot right inside me. And, I looked up in the sky and I said to God, consciousness, and these ETs, I said, congratulations. In a 4-month period, you have managed to totally transform a complete atheist, material rationalist, into someone that has more belief in a God consciousness, more belief in the spirit world, and that we are eternal spirits, and that there is indeed life after death, than any Catholic priest in Miami. Wow. And to this day, I have that. It's not even a belief. It's just a fact. I know it as a fact.
Right. You have a knowingness.
A knowingness. And then after that date was when a good many of my paranormal experiences began and free began. I was able to determine who was an experiencer.
Yes. Hold that thought, Ray. We're on a commercial break. We'll be back in about 5-6 minutes, and listeners, we are going to talk about.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, Captain Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you will having all the broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me. Later.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back, to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with your host, Janet Kira Lesson, and co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And before we get back to this fascinating show with our guest, Rey Hernandez, I would like to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener supported. So please, if you would, go over to the donation button on the website and donate what you can. $1, $5, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donation. So the first hour we were talking about Rey's personal journey into spirituality and the world of extraterrestrial contact. And the second hour we're going to focus on FREE, which is the Foundation for Research in Extraterrestrial Encounters. And of course we're going to have to ask Rey and find out how you got from those episodes in your research to be one of the co-founders of FREE with Mary Rodwell, and I don't have my
Edgar
notes.
Mitchell.
And Edgar Mitchell. All these people are fascinating people, are on the staff or part of this association. Sasha, would you like to say something, Dr. Leslie?
No, I just want to hear what Ray's got to say.
Okay, so good to Rey. How did you get from all that fascinating stuff that was going on in your life, and in one short period in 2012, which was a very magical year? You're not the first that I've heard that 2012 did stuff for them. So, but it's fascinating to hear another thing that was happening in 2012. So how did you get from there to being one of the co-founders of FREE?
Well, Janet and Sasha, shortly thereafter, I selectively began to inform individuals of our experiences. And lo and behold, a good many of these individuals were experiencers themselves. I eventually was called by many people an ET magnet, because I've managed to, how should I say, sort of like a gold miner mining for gold. I've managed to unearth many experiencers that have never even mentioned to anyone of their experiences. I just knew that these were individuals that had contact. And I know that's not something uncommon. I know that a lot of experiencers state the same thing, but
I think what happens when you start having these experiences is that you get upgraded and you become more psychic and intuitive, and so that's one of the benefits of having contact.
Or perhaps many more people have had contact than they are consciously aware of, or not only willing to admit, but even willing to admit to themselves.
Yeah.
That's another factor, yes.
Yeah, no, that's what began to happen over the next 5 months, from basically the end of that last week of December to about May. And so let me sort of transition to how FREE was started. Okay. What happened was towards the end of during that time period, right before I had had the NDE experience, those 3 days in a row. Several weeks beforehand, I had sent about maybe 10 letters to different individuals, like the biggest names in this field, Whitley Strieber, Barbara Lamb, Mary Rodwell, et cetera, et cetera. And what happened was in May of 2013, a little bit more than a year ago, I was driving in the middle of the major thoroughfare here in Miami, going into the downtown Miami. And I was in the middle of a traffic jam at about 8:30 in the morning. And by then, I had only found one experiencer to communicate with, and her name is Christina Knowles. And she, together with Mary Rodwell, are the three co-founders of FREE. And I only had been communicating with her for about maybe a month and a half, 2 months maximum. So anyway, all of a sudden I got what I called at that time an ET telegram. And what it was a voice. It didn't sound like anyone else's voice. It was sort of like hard to describe, but it was sort of my own voice. But it wasn't a thought. It was like a telegram coming into your head. And it was basically telling me what I had to do. And it was very, very specific, as if someone was dictating it into your brain, you know. You will do this, you will do that, you know, and let me give you some specifics. It was a little bit more lengthier, but basically it was that I need to form an organization to convey to humanity the relationship between ETs, the spirit world, and quantum physics. You will not do this for profit motive. You will get individuals that are egoless, that have no ego in this adventure, and your mission is to wake up, humanity to its true mission, to its true, reality.
Right.
And it was like, and then I saw a video associated with it. And the video, I described it. Only one person had something very, very similar, and that was Audrey Hewins from Starborn Support. She's also an experiencer herself. When I told her this story, she said, "Oh my God, the same thing happened to me." And she ran and grabbed one of her journals, and she described it to me. It's exactly what I saw, and it's difficult to describe it, but it was a video that was in my head. And, I was like, inside a spoke of a wheel, sort of like, that Wheel of Fortune where you spin it around and that contestant show. Except what happened was that, inside these different spokes was a different paranormal phenomenon. And, here I was in the middle of the fulcrum of the spoke as it was spinning around, and I was seeing near-death experiences, shamanic, experiences, remote viewing, near-death experiences, ET contact, the spirit world, and on and on and on, out-of-body experiences, mystical meditation, all floating around. And what was holding everything together was quantum physics. Okay. That was the vision. Okay. Immediately I called Christina at 8:30 in the morning, and I said, "Christina, you up?" She says, "Yeah." I says, "You won't freaking believe what the hell just happened." And I explained it to her. And she says, "Ray, pull over the side of the road if you're freaking out, because I don't want to get into an accident." I said, "I'm in the middle of a traffic jam. I can't even pull over, And I'm not freaked out. It's just that, wow, I had to tell somebody, to get grounded. And so what happened was that same night when I got home, I got an email from Mary Rodwell. Okay. The email went something like this: "Dear Ray, I'm so sorry that I'm responding to you now from an email that you sent 6 months ago, but I just happened to find it." Okay.
Wow.
And let me give you a little story about that. About 2 months ago, I asked Mary, I've asked her a couple of times, but the last time was about 2 months ago. I said, "Mary, how often do you go back and check your emails? Do you go back 6 months?" And Mary said, laughing, she says, "Ray, I can barely keep up with one day's email. How in the world am I going to keep up with something 6 months ago?" She said, "I never go back, to check my emails. I just don't have the time for it." And then I told her, "Mary, how do you explain what happened?" And she busted out laughing. She said, "Ray, you know very well what happened."
Right.
And so, yeah. And so I responded to Mary and I said, "Well, you ain't heard nothing yet, Then I explained to her what happened with the 3 NDEs, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all that I had done over those 4-month period, because I didn't send that to her in her first letter. I only had sent up to that huge craft my daughter and I had seen. And then I told her what had happened today, out in the highway. And so immediately she sent back an email and she said, "Ray, we need to Skype, and I never even used Skype before. And she was the one that taught me how to use it.
I love Skype.
I downloaded Skype and, learned how to use it. And then she told me she had never heard of anyone seeing such a huge craft at such a low altitude for such a long time with so many witnesses. Okay. And then I told her about these other 2 new experiences. And she was like, "Holy cow, Ray, we got something going here, And then, she said that she also was very dear friends with Dr. Rudy Shields, who is a retired professor of astrophysics from Harvard. And now he's at the Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And that she met him 2 years before at a major, conference that the John Mack Institute invited her to participate in. And, it took place in Rhode Island. And they had, many dear friends of Dr. Mack. And it was sort of like a symposium for, on behalf of Dr. Mack, sponsored by the Institute, his institute. And he already had been deceased several years by then.
Right.
So that's where she met Rudy, and Rudy was on his board of advisors, and he was a very close friend of Dr. Mack. I think in the book Passport to the Cosmos, he mentioned Rudy several times because he went to Rudy to explain the physics behind what's going on. And that's how Rudy got interested in all this in the first place. So then, what happened was that, the next day, we hung up and, I said, okay, we'll agree to continue our conversation. So the next day at 9:30 in the morning, I got a telephone call from Dr. Rudy Shields. Okay. And I was like, holy, what, here's a 74-year-old, expert in black holes who basically, won a battle with Stephen Hawking for 30 years as to what was the true nature of black holes, He was finally vindicated after all those years, And at that point, I didn't even know anything about him or anything about that. I would subsequently learn that. But for the next 90 minutes, all he did was spoon-fed me like a little baby advanced quantum physics and how quantum physics, particularly the quantum hologram theory, can explain all of the diverse paranormal phenomena.
So can you kind of do a little aside there and give us a summary of what is happening?
In the conversation with Rudy?
No, in the quantum reality, what is happening?
Oh, right now?
Well, yeah, I'll catch you off guard.
Well, I had a little download a couple of days ago, and it dealt with that this so-called awakening that everybody's talking about. What it is, it's actually being driven by the physics of our universe, the physics of our quantum hologram, and it's being accelerated exponentially, and it revolves around consciousness. That
what is making it accelerate? Is that I've seen several videos and been studying this a little bit myself because of where we are in the alignment with the galactic core. That seems to be awakening us and has turned on our natural DMT within our minds, and that's we're talking about the shamanic practices and theories. So anyway,
I don't know anything about the accelerations, stuff. I got so much stuff that I'm dealing with free. I haven't read about that, but I have heard from many experiences, that, and even my wife came out like a trance. This was in the spring of 2013. Maybe I ought to transition to that to help explain it. She basically just all of a sudden came out of the blue. It was like a voice entered her. And she started talking you and dramatic change is coming. Say
that sentence again. You just flipped out. I'm sorry. Say that last sentence again.
Yeah, one day in the spring, before I had that download in the highway, my wife, all out of the blue, just comes downstairs and tells me, "You're not religious enough." And I said, "What do you mean I'm not religious enough?" "Well, at church, in the prayer group, you were holding out your hands. I didn't feel any energy in your hands. And that means that you're not spiritual enough." And the last place I feel spiritual is at a Catholic church. I didn't say that to her, but anyway, then she said, "You're not spiritual enough." And then she said, "You have to understand that a big transition is taking place. And what's going to happen is that, there's going to be a big cleansing of humanity. And we might not make it, but, humanity is going to change like the Native Americans. We're going to learn to be feeding off the land. We're going to not be needing any, medical doctors to rip us off and using all this toxic medicine." And she just went on and on and on and on. But my wife is not like that. She doesn't read any, of the New Age literature. She doesn't even go to the internet. We don't even have a TV in our house. She never reads any of these books. It's just like all of a sudden it just came out.
It's a download.
That's what it was, And afterwards she went straight to bed and she fell asleep like in 2 minutes,
Right.
And it was like, I was like, what the, But anyway, it was, what I got was something that dealt with, that the awakening is due to an acceleration of some types of physics in our universe, and it deals with an acceleration of consciousness. And what I saw was sort of like a shell where it's going in circles and it's getting closer in, sort of like when something goes into the black hole. Rudy explains it to me that it goes straight in concentric circles, and then but what happened was it's accelerating as it's getting concentrated exponentially, and then it's going to come. Excuse me?
It's a toroidal. The circles get smaller and smaller, creating a toroidal structure.
Correct. I found that out later on. I was trying to remember the word. Mm-hmm. And then it gets to the point where I felt like it's sort of like you then pierce like a bubble. And all of a sudden the water comes flushing out into our reality. And that water is consciousness. And it's going to be, we're all going to be bathed into an ability to be able to interact in our multidimensional reality. That was sort of what came in. It came in like in 1 second, you know. It wasn't like over 15 minutes. It was like zam, you know. And I'm still trying to grasp what it was. The thing that comes closest to it is that a lot of people are talking about something similar. And I asked Mary, and she said obviously she's heard that before, but she never heard the physics angle of it. That it being driven by some type of mathematical physics exponentially, you know, going in that direction.
Go ahead, Sasha.
Okay, Jenna wanted me to say a little bit something. For a long time, we've known of something called Bell's theorem, which is that objects or energies, once in connection, maintain that connection no matter how distant. If you have an electron that's going from left to right, with a pair that's doing identical, and you move one to New York and keep one in California, and you reverse the polarity and direction of one, it automatically changes the other. Well, as it happens at every level, as Nibiru and Nemesis, some of these planetary bodies that we're interacting with, come closer and closer to Solaris, the same thing is happening in our minds. So all the things that we ordinarily separate become available to us. That's at least one way of thinking of it.
Yeah, well, that exactly was the conversation that Rudy had with me. He went over entanglement theory, non-locality explanations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was familiar with these topics, you know, reading these consciousness studies books. And actually, Edgar, as both of you know, Edgar really is one of the early pioneers in the relationship between the quantum hologram theory of physics and consciousness. And he has numerous papers on our website, which some of them more difficult than others and some are easy to read, which explain, you know, basic quantum physics, the quantum hologram, and how it's related to consciousness. So if there are any readers that are out there that want to learn more about the true nature of our reality, I would encourage them to go to our website, which is experiencer.co. And we have two submenus. One is a submenu on physics and another submenu on consciousness. And there's some articles that are very easy to read, some that are intermediary articles, and others are some advanced articles. Not so advanced that only a physicist could read it, but you know they're somewhat heavy duty. So we have a broad mixtures.
Another person that's really good about explaining the quantum physics level is Nassim Harriman. And he lives in Kauai, but he has a bunch of YouTubes, Nassim Harriman, and we might want to contact him. He's also an experiencer contactee. So he's been out talking about the quantum reality and quantum physics and about the singularity that's within each and every one of us. So that wormhole, that toroid is in every single thing, from the smallest, molecule, cell, atom to, giant, planets and suns and things in space, and we are connected. You can mathematically calculate this, the quantum reality, and we are connected in a single line. It's called the singularity. So that's why everything goes into the quantum field at the speed of light, and it comes back into us at the speed of light. So we're continually creating reality, and reality is creating us simultaneously at the speed of light, probably even faster. Did you have something to say, something?
I want listeners to not worry about leaving the exclusivity of the materialist rationalist perspective, because you keep that. When you transcend that, it's not gone. It just is incorporated in a bigger whole. So don't worry about losing that. You won't lose it. It'll just be part of your repertoire.
Right. You still have your car in your house, right, Ray? even though you.
I still got to pay my mortgage and my bills.
Yes. Okay.
And I still have a wife that gets upset with me occasionally. So.
Yeah, that's the reality.
So anyway, we do have to continue the physics discussion very briefly. We have 5 theoretical physicists in free. And these theoretical physicists are experts. I mean, experts at the highest level of theoretical physics on the quantum hologram and consciousness. So I encourage everyone to go to free. But let me give a brief continuation of how free got started, and then we'll go into the specifics of free. So here I am talking to Rudy Shields. He then tells me, he's the very first person to tell me, Ray, you need to form an organization to complete your mission. So he was talking about mission and things of that sort. It didn't even enter my mind. And then he said, I will be, if you do decide to move in that direction, I will be your scientific advisor. Okay? And as a matter of fact, Edgar Mitchell is a dear friend of mine, and he's my mentor. And I was like, holy shit, you know.
Yeah.
And he says, as a matter of fact, I'm going to give him a call and I'm going to send him an email, and here's his telephone number. You need to talk to him. And then, you know, we agreed to continue our discussions later. So for about 5 hours, I was hesitant to call Edgar because to me, he was like a demigod, you know, because I had read, you know, all this literature, and I knew he was the father of modern consciousness studies. I'd read all these articles he had written on the quantum hologram, on zero-point energy, on consciousness. And he truly was like light years above almost everyone else, you know. And if Rudy called him his mentor, and Rudy's someone that bested, you know, Stephen Hawkins after a 30-year debate on black holes, then imagine being a mentor to Rudy Shields, you know. Mm-hmm. So anyway, after 5 hours, I called Edgar, and he says, first thing he says, I was expecting your phone call. And I was like,
why did you take so long?
Yeah, you know. And when it happened, he had just gotten off the phone with Rudy. He had gotten an email early in the day. So he knew a little bit about my story from Rudy, and he invited me to his house. And he lives only 90 minutes away in Lake Worth, Florida, and I live in Miami. So I went up there not knowing what to expect, and what I got was like 3 hours of like unbelievable. I won't go into the details, but it was like a whole kitchen soup, a gumbo soup of his whole life. Yeah, truly fascinating. And at the end of it all, he goes to me and he says, look, Ray, just like Rudy, you need to form this organization. Rudy and I will back you up. We will be your scientific advisors. And then I went home and I immediately got on an email. I sent an email to Christina and to Mary, and I said, look, we need to talk. Let's get on Skype. So we got on a Skype. I told them what happened the last 2 days. And I said, we need to form an organization. And they all agreed, you know, for us to be the co-founders. And 2 days later, Mary came up with the name FREE, Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. And the two other, co-founders were Edgar Mitchell and Rudy Shields, you know. And then after that, we had an explosion of individuals wanting to participate in FREE. Within a 2-week period, we had literally a who's who of the top researchers in this area wanting to be associated with FREE. And that's how we got off the ground. And now in terms of let me go over very briefly, if I could transition into the 3 missions of FREE. Okay. FREE has 3 distinct missions. The first mission is education. Now, by education, our approach at FREE is different from the MUFON folks that just focus on lights in the skies and people that see things and trying to get forensic material, walking around with the little Geiger counters, you know. Last MUFON meeting I went to, I had 2 guys that took out their Apple iPod with this new attachment, and they were putting all over my body to see if I had some,
Oh, the implants.
Whatever it was, you know.
I've seen that at a conference.
And I went there and I said, these people are clueless, you know. And so anyway, what happened was education to show that this phenomenon is so much more complex than just lights in the sky and abductions. Okay. That our focus is on ET contact. And that's just not UFO related, because we're defining ETs as contact with non-human intelligent beings. And that comes about through numerous different modalities, like the shamanic experiences, like near-death experiences, mystical meditation, remote viewing, etc., etc. All of our members of our advisory board, some more intimately than others, know that it's all interrelated. So on top of that gumbo soup of interdisciplinary mindsets, which have normally been purposely bifurcated, so no one can get a clear grasp of what's going on, we're throwing on top of that advanced quantum physics, specifically focusing on the quantum hologram theory of physics and on consciousness, which is a derivative of the quantum hologram theory of physics. So when you mix all that up together, you form a complex gumbo soup, and that's free. And then we have on our website hundreds of articles that talk about all of these complexities. We have videos and to help explain these complexities, and the vast majority of them are very simple to read type of discussions. We have experiencer stories from all different types of experiencers, all walks of life. So that's the educational component, and the main focus of that is the website. Now, in the very near future, we're going to be having educational seminars, like workshops. They're going to be videotaped, and we hope to get 3 to 4 people on one of these workshops on specific topic areas. For example, just on the topic of support. For individuals that have had these encounters, you could easily do 10 different topics on different aspects of support, on quantum hologram or consciousness. You could have, again, another 10 different topic areas of what is consciousness. The shamanic experience, how is that associated with consciousness and ET contact, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that down the line is also going to be incorporated into our education component. Now, the second component, as I alluded to earlier, is there are a lot of individuals out there that were traumatized, are traumatized, and will be traumatized for many different complex reasons. Now, in my case, the experiences were, quote-unquote, positive, but still they were traumatic to a sense because I had no one to talk to. Your whole worldview is upside down. And who can you talk to? So for 9 months, I was quiet. And that's very, very disruptive. If
so
I would have had
to address that with this free organization, how are you going to?
Well, correct. Now we have 3 components.
I was involved with another group in another whole field, and we started doing local support groups and meetings, and that became a global phenomenon. And I know there are some. ET contact, the experiencer support groups. But do you have any ideas of how?
Yes, we have three specific components that address that issue. One is we're going to be establishing something called an experiencer buddy, and that means someone to talk to. So if you let us know through free that you want someone to chat, we have 30 volunteers that are going to be ready once we start implementing this project that will email you or call you if you decide to be able to chat with you. And that will be an experiencer buddy. And the individuals are mature individuals that have gone through the trauma and have overcome it. Individuals that are grounded, that are knowledgeable about this phenomenon. So that's the Experiencer Buddy project. Secondly, we're putting in our website, we have a list now that we're revising. It was 25 pages in length, but we're finding many errors in that list. But it's a list of certified mental health therapists, a list of regression therapists, all of them that have worked with experiencers. We're not just taking, any name out of the yellow book. These are people that have experience working with contactees, experiencers, abductees, whatever you might want to call it, okay? Then
My
the third
sister-in-law is the head of the International Hypnosis Federation, and I think there's like 60,000 members. And I've talked to her about this issue. She could probably help update that catalog of these people in her organization that have worked with the contactees.
Yeah, we need that support, and we'll touch base after our phone call.
Yes.
And then the last component is we have an experiencer forum. And that's what it is. It's a forum for experiencers to share their experiences, to talk with other experiencers. They have the ability to put their their emails there. So if they want someone to chat with them in the email, they would leave their email there and then can have private chats. So those are the three components for support. And then the last component is something called the Free Experiencer Research Project. And let me explain a little bit in detail about that. What that is that when I had my experiences, besides going crazy on the internet, reading all these UFO books, I did sort of on my own an academic literature review on the ET contact phenomenon. And what I realized was that there was, boatloads of stuff, obviously, on NDEs, because there's numerous medical doctors and medical institutions working in this area, in terms of ESP and the Stanford Research Institute, the Ryan Institute, University of Virginia, on reincarnation, etc., and ESP stuff. For shamanic studies, obviously, anthropologists have been working in this field for, countless numbers of years. For remote viewing, Stanford Research Institute did a lot of study on that. And then there's a couple of institutes. The Edgar Cayce Institute is continuing with that. But when it comes to academic studies on the ET UFO contact phenomenon, I could count them on the palm of my hand, the academic researchers that have been working on this. And even then, whatever was publicized was quite limited. So tell you quite frankly, I was shocked, because here it is, the biggest secret in humanity, and there's almost nothing known about it. Okay. And so, again, I was quote unquote guided to contact Dr. John Climo. I never even knew who this guy was before. And all of a sudden, one day, we're already having agreements for him to be the chair of this research project. But let me tell you a little bit about it. I got this guy's email, this professor's email. I sent him an email, and I told him a little bit about my story. And I said, can we chat on the telephone? He gave me his telephone. We discussed, and I told him all of my stories. Then he told me that he's been a lifelong experiencer. Okay. Then he went through all the.
What's his last name? I'm not catching it.
John is Jon, no H.
Okay.
And Climo is Klimo.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. And he is, in my opinion, probably the world's leading academic researcher on the paranormal. His most famous book was an academic book on channeling that's been translated to 18 languages. He's also written several books on death and the death experience. And he's published tons of articles in different journals, mostly non-academic journals related to the paranormal, because who the hell is going to be accepting publication in that topic area, So,
right.
But he's been working in in this area for 40 years. He's chaired 250 PhD dissertations. Out of those, 75 have been on the paranormal. Okay, so I guess that qualifies him as an expert.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I told him my methodology of how we can begin to academically and quote-unquote scientifically study this phenomenon. And he was blown away by it. And then I said, John, I want you to be the chair of our research committee. And he was like taken back, and he says, oh, my God. He says, I was born for this. It's like a match made in heaven, and I'm just retiring, Mm-hmm. And then at that point, he agreed to be the chairperson. And I said, I'm thinking of contacting Dr. Leo Sprinkle. Do you know him? She said, I've known Leo for 30 years. Very good friend of mine. And we'll both contact him. And that's how the research project got underway with these two academics. And then the individuals what I told John was I wanted to have sort of like research assistants, but they would be individuals that people that have had their boots on the ground researching this phenomenon at an experiencer level for at least 25 years. And as I said before, it's a who's who. We have, for example, Whitley Strieber, okay, Mary Rodwell, Barbara Lamb, Dr. Joe Lewis. We have Kathleen Martin, who's the head of MUFON's Alien Abduction Research Team. Denise Stoner, who's also on MUFON's Alien Abduction Research Team, and Denise is a lifelong experiencer. We have Craig Lang, who's like the third member of that triumvirate with MUFON's Alien Abduction Research Team. And we've just recently added another PhD psychologist, Dr. Melton from Pennsylvania, and he is one of the founders of Starborn Support. And on top of that, we have Giorgio Piacenza, who is a member of the board of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and John Sala's Exopolitics Group, and another genius who dabbles in quantum physics and is a true expert in consciousness. And we have about four other individuals at that type of level. Ralph Steiner. Ralph Steiner was a child math and physics prodigy, an experiencer for the last 25 years, has been researching the paranormal for about 25 years. So it's that type of caliber are on our research committee.
That's fascinating. We're running out of time, and I want to get a little bit into what are we discovering. So the website is experiencer.co. And
yes,
let's get into, we only have it's 37 before the hour, so we don't have a lot of time left. Let's kind of summarize. What are we discovering about this phenomenon? We'll have to do another whole show on,
okay. Well, what we're going to be doing with the research study is going to be the first ever long-term academic study of the ET contact experiencers. Initially, we're focusing just on UFO-related ET contact.
Okay, eventually, so I'm an experiencer. How do I get my story into this?
Okay.
This project here.
All right. Let me go over the methodology a little bit. Okay. On our website, we have a quantitative survey instrument. Which can take you approximately 15 minutes to complete. These are yes and no questions. These are questions that are going to be utilized to help us determine whether you've had contact or not. Again, we're leaving the ability for individuals to let us know whether they want to participate in a phase 2 component. And they'll be leaving their email and or a telephone number for us to reach us back. In order to take the survey, you don't have to identify yourself. You could put, Joe Schmo, whatever, Now, the phase 2 is going to involve direct interviews. We have approximately now 30 individuals that have volunteered to become interviewers. And just like the experiencer buddies, these are, mature individuals, all experiencers that have been there, done that are going to be helping to administer these questionnaires. A good many of them, are educated individuals as well, but that's not a necessary criteria. We're in the process now of developing these phase 2 questionnaires. These phase 2 questionnaires we're going to be beginning with open-ended questions. These open-ended questions, because the forced choice questions that individuals had to take in the initial quantitative survey instrument, we're sort of leading them down a particular rabbit hole.
Witness, yeah.
Yeah, we're leading them through a particular rabbit hole based upon the nature of those type of questions. So what we want to do is we want to take a step back. Okay, let's sort of forget you answered those questions. Let's start from the beginning, okay? And make sure that what happened to you actually was an NDE, and not, a little gray coming to get you, So we're starting with these open-ended questions, tell us about your experience, very generalized questions.
Yeah, what I do on my radio show with experiencers is I just interview them and I get the story, kind of like documenting their story based on their natural flow of what comes off from their mind. If you direct it too much, then you're leading the witness, but you might be also creating the experience. That's what we have to watch. So the early experiencers didn't have this whole volume of information that we have had for the last 60 years now, or ever since the first case that was well known was Betty and Barney Hill, right? So now we've got this in our continuum. It is in our knowledge bank that there are, grays are everywhere, right? they're on advertisements for commercials. So it's kind of polluted right now. So we want to try to, figure out what's really going on. So I'm trying to anybody in the box, and it's like, but you've had some kind of, like yours wouldn't have been in a category 20 years ago. They would have gone.
Yeah. Well, what you've just stated is the exact methodology that we're approaching this. Okay. When these interviewers are calling these individuals that have agreed to participate in this phase 2 project, for the first series of telephone calls, again, this is a long-term relationship that they're establishing with these experiencers. Okay. For the first series of telephone calls, there are these open-ended questions. Okay. And again, similar like you're doing an interview. And we want at least one interview, an early interview, to be on Skype so we can see them, see it's a real live person, and that's someone that's fictitious. Okay. So at that point, there will be a confidentiality issue of disclosing who you are. If we cannot verify who you are, then we really cannot, proceed.
Right.
And so, again, these open-ended questions. Now, after we've had a series of these open-ended questions, and they themselves have opened up these different rabbit holes to pursue, depending on which rabbit hole they mention and talk about, we're going to be having a series of like tertiary questions to follow up. For example, individuals that might have stated that they have gotten science or physics or math downloads, we're going to be having separate questions for that specific topic component. Mm-hmm. We're going to be starting off these tertiary question topic areas, again by open-ended questions, just to flush out, in an open-ended way, some of these issues. Mm-hmm. And then we will be developing Likert scale type of questions, from 1 to 7. And also these forced choice, true or false, yes or no type of responses. And then for each of these open-ended responses, we're going to be developing these, I forgot the word, these special query word analysis. I forgot the exact format that they name it, where when you name a specific...
Do you have something you want to say, honey?
Well, I don't know if it fits in the middle of this, but from my perspective, I've got some really detailed accounts from Adapa, known in the Christian world as Enoch, and extensive ET contacts. And it's really interesting. It's not just about non-humans, really, because the Anunnaki were humans just like us. We are an adaptation of their genome. I'm an ethnologist, which is a kind of anthropologist, and I got to say, these things have been going on for way longer than just the recent times.
Right. So we've got the historical.
Someone has brought that up before, so we need to be able how to figure out that component into our work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can help with that, Sasha.
Experiencers have been contactees through many lifetimes.
Yeah, we're going to be pursuing those aspects as well.
Okay.
Because we have many members of our board that have had those type of experiences, the actual researchers, because I mentioned everyone's an experiencer at different types of levels, some more profound than others. So getting back in terms of the methodological responses, these special query word analysis are going to be used. So someone mentions, let's say, spiritual transformation, we'll be able to quantify every time they mention that and see in what context they've used that. So the interviewers are going to be trained by the 2 professors. The other members of our research committee, the people that have been grounded in this field for 25 years at least, they're going to be providing a list of do's and don'ts. We'll have like a training seminar for them from both the perspective, the methodological perspective, and from the researchers in terms of what to do, what not to do. This is how to approach them, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully we will have these secondary questions done by the end of the year. Our next meeting of our full research committee is going to be the first week of September. But yet we have a subgroup that's working on these questions that's pretty much meeting on a weekly basis.
So people can join no matter where they are, because this is, we have Skype and it's universal, correct?
Correct. We have a conference call that we're using, conference call number, and that's how we communicate. Now, the third phase of this, we've already have interviewed a good many of these individuals. Then what we want to be able to do is to identify these special case studies, like these individuals that have just blowing everybody away. Individuals similar to like your life stories, yourselves.
Right.
And what we want to be able to do is these more in-depth type of reviews, similar like book length type of reviews.
There are people that kind of are in a unique category all their own, like Simon Parkes from the UK. You've got Alex Collier. You've got George Casavillas. And these are people that have had lifelong experiences. Billy Meyer, and they're kind of like a different level than the,
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised, Janet and Sasha, in my short time, in about a year, actually working on this research aspects of it, how many people I've spoken with that have just literally blown me away. Makes my experiences look like little pittance. and I haven't even told you, not even 5% of my experiences. But there are so many people out there. It's just that a lot of people are well known, but so many others are not well known.
Oh, I say there's several, thousand to millions unknown for everyone that's known.
Yes, most definitely.
Judgments and criticisms and even their own self-judging. Am I crazy? It takes a lot for someone to come out with their own story. Yeah. And so, from what we've been at this for a long time. Dr. Lesson started working with experiencers back in the 60s, and it's very, very complicated to get people in touch with their stories. And they're, a lot of times an experiencer will just I saw the lights in the sky, but once they go into it with a hypnosis, they'll uncover so much underneath it. That's just the tip of the iceberg, and this seems it seems like you're going to get just a small percentage of what's really going on there.
If I could touch on that topic there, Janet.
Yeah.
That's a very important topic that you mentioned, okay? As we all know, people are slowly becoming aware of this phenomenon. One thing that we hope to do is to educate the masses about what truly is going on. And what we're going to be developing is a series of videos called Out of the Closet videos. Mm-hmm. And what this is going to be 3 to 5 minute snippets. Like, hi, my name is Rey Hernandez. I'm an estate tax attorney with the IRS. I'm also an experiencer. Let me tell you a brief summary of my experiences, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's important for humanity to know that I'm a normal, functioning human being, and I've had these types of experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And what we want is to put on our site thousands of regular people citing in a 3 to 5 minute either video or audio of their experiences. And what we want to call them is out
themselves and just submit them?
Excuse me?
Are they able to use your model, record their own experiences and just send them to you to maybe expedite?
Yes, we're working on the protocols for doing that. And again, it'll be limited to 3 to 5 minutes, and we're going to be telling them more or less what we want for the site. And obviously there are degrees of comfort here. Some people don't mind having their faces and voices, stated. Other people just their voices. Other people might just want it in writing. Okay. So we're going to have those 3 types of components, but we're still going to be calling it Out of the Closet videos, because we want humanity to know that there are literally millions of individuals having contact with non-human intelligent beings.
Great. What about support for people that want their story witnessed and it's longer than 3 to 5 minutes? Are you going to have any way for someone to, like yourself, you've developed you're talking about it, and it really helps to talk about it,
Sure.
be witnessed, not judged. And so I'm wondering what can be done for these people, because they really a lot of them need therapy. They need, so Dr. Liss, what do you want to say?
Oh, I just want to say that I find one of the first things to do is to have a person realize that they don't have to identify with their primary self or their social facade, and that they can develop a center which can access parts of them that their facade may even be unconscious of. And when you develop a center, then you can integrate the experiences much better. And so I think it's really important, and that's what you're calling a mature person is what I would call a centered person who can experience both their social, material, and their spiritual side.
Great. So there's what I'm looking at is some support system where their entire story can be witnessed somehow, and that involves a lot of these people. They need intensive therapy, and hypnotherapy. So that I think we addressed in the first part of this conversation.
Well, let me address the issue of stories. Okay. We have one of the menu sections called Experiencer Stories. So if anyone is out there that wants to publicize your story, we will review it and put it on our website. I don't mind having 1,000 Experiencer Stories up there for people to read. We can put them in different categories. And some of these can be very full-length stories. You could send them by experience, by chapter, whatever way you want to send them. So there is a mechanism for people to publicize their experiences. And in terms of the support, I think if anyone out there that really needs someone to talk to, okay, we do have this Experiencer study. You could send an email to our email. It's called free, FREE, at experiencer.co. That's free, FREE, at experiencer.co. And let us know that you would like to talk to someone about your experiences. And we will put another fellow experiencer who is grounded. I don't know if that was the appropriate term, Sasha, that you used. Centered. I apologize. To give you a return phone call. And then if that interviewer decides that you're heavily traumatized, we do have 5 PhD psychologists. All of them have been working with experiencers for many, many years. They have volunteered, again, because of the medical issues. They will not be providing quote-unquote therapy, because then we're dealing, as both of you know, with these medical aspects of licensing. What they'll be doing is joining, in the conference call as a buddy. And then if someone really needs assistance, we can point to the list of the licensed mental health therapists that we have in our group. We're also going to be publicizing, as I stated earlier, regression therapists. These are individuals that do hypnotic regression, that work on therapy aspects. And we're going to be publicizing the actual certifications that they have. So if someone only has had a 2-hour online course on hypnotic regression versus someone that's had full length 500 hours on hypnotherapy, dealing with therapy issues, all of that is going to be published on our website, so you'll be able to cross compare. And then finally, we've got the support groups, which are very, very important. And throughout the world, not just the U.S., we're trying to provide a detailed list of all the support groups that are out there. So if you are aware of any of your listeners are aware of a support group, please send me the email, the telephone, the contact information for the support group that you are knowledgeable of. If you know of any licensed mental health therapists that are working with experiencers, please pass that information on to our email, and also anyone doing regression therapy with experiencers. So once again, our email is free at experiencer.co.
Great. We have about 3 minutes left. So what do we want to cover in our last 3 minutes?
Well, just to convey to the audience, listeners that are out there, that you're not alone, that this is happening worldwide, that if you need help, you need support, you have free that you can touch base with, and there's so many other institutions and organizations that are out there worldwide. We can put you in contact with them depending on where you live. That this is an extremely complex phenomenon. It's just not, abduction by evil gray aliens that all you see is
That's my question. Yeah. What is happening? What type of experiences, are people having? Like there were categories, like in one of the articles here of the types. Do you have that? Well,
the types of experiences that are people happening run the full gamut of experiences. You cannot really pigeonhole these types of experiences. Some people are having supposedly physical contact type of experiences. Some people are having non-physical contact experiences. Some people, all their contacts are in a matrix type of reality. Right. So it's not just a spaceship and they're being taken up to the spaceship. No, that actually, from my personal experience of talking to hundreds of individuals, that actually is a very, very small fraction of what's going on there. And again, there's, negative entities that people have reported to me, but the vast majority have been positive entities. So at this point, in terms of the Free Research Committee, our approach is that we know very little to almost nothing about this phenomenon. We're approaching it with a clean slate. We're going into this with no preconceived notions whatsoever, whether they're good or bad, evil, or whatever they are. Okay, or this process. We're going in there with a clean slate because this is such an extremely complex phenomenon.
It is. So people have physical experiences. There's people that have MyLabs experiences, which even involves the military. So there's all these different categories. Some are astral. I heard that one reason they take people astrally is that it's less harmful in the body. Sometimes there's physical trauma going through the dimensions or on the ships because of their environments that might be suited for other beings. So that's why you might have a physical contact, and then later contact will be more of a spiritual aspect, astral type. Okay, final minute. Anything you want to say, Dr. Lesson?
Oh, this is wonderful what you're doing. I think this is going to institutionalize a path that we can share with the world.
All right, Ray. Thank you so much for being on today's show. It was fascinating, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Jana and Sasha, and I look forward to conversing with you off the air as well. And stay
online as Sean disconnected us. Okay.
Yeah.